Good evening, or good morning, or honestly, whatever time of day it is when you're consuming this. I completely understand you've lost track, days blur together, you wake up, you check your phone, and there it is. Another headline, another viral moment, another thing you have to explain to your parents over the phone while they ask if you're eating enough. We are gathered here today, symbolically at least, not to eulogize America. Let's be clear about that. America is alive. America is loud. America is, in fact, loudly posting things on True Social at 2 in the morning. That will make your jaw hit the floor before your coffee finishes brewing. This is a symposium, a word that comes from the ancient Greek symposium, meaning to drink together. And frankly, that feels appropriate because what I'm about to walk you through over the next 15 minutes is going to require either a stiff drink or an extraordinary amount of patience. We are going to talk about the President of the United States sharing a video of Barack Obama depicted as an ape. We are going to talk about the Attorney General of the United States, the nation's top law enforcement official, showing up to Congress with what can only be described as a burned book. We are going to talk about wars, secret lists, nuclear standoffs, and a board of peace that was announced on True Social. And we are going to ask very seriously, is this going well? Spoiler, it depends on who you ask. Let's start with something that in any previous era of American politics would have been the only story for 6 months. On a recent Wednesday, the President of the United States, a man with nuclear launch codes, the largest military in human history, and apparently an enormous amount of free time, shared a video on his social media platform depicting Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, not rush past it, sit with it. The video was eventually taken down, but not before it had been seen by millions, not before it had inspired rare bipartisan condemnation, including from Senator Tim Scott, a black Republican senator who called it, and I am quoting here, the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. Senator Tim Scott, who endorsed Trump, who campaigned for Trump, who wore the MAGA hat. That's where we are now. That's who's doing the condemning now. And even that's rare, bipartisan, obvious condemnation of something that does not require a philosophy degree to identify as wrong, was met by the president reportedly calling one of the Republican critics dead to him, Senator Katie Britt, dead to him, over a tweet calling racism bad. This is the political environment in which every other event this week occurred. Keep that as your backdrop. It's important. Let us turn now to the Department of Justice, once considered among the most august institutions in American government, a place where, as one editorial put it this week, for decades, a federal prosecutor position was apolitical, reserved for only the best and brightest lawyers with unassailable ethics. Now, the most important job requirement that editorial continued is loyalty to Donald Trump. Attorney General Pam Bondi arrived at a House Judiciary Committee hearing on February the 11th to answer questions about the Jeffrey Epstein files. Files the American public, including Trump's own base, had desperately wanted to see. Files that had been promised repeatedly, with Bondi herself saying that a list of Epstein clients was sitting on her desk right now. What was released? Largely redacted nothing. A heavily blacked out document that, in one particularly stunning failure, still contained the real names and nude photographs of some of Epstein's victims, the survivors, the people the whole exercise was supposed to help. Bondi came to Congress to explain herself, and what happened instead was one of the most remarkable displays of combativeness in the history of congressional testimony. She called a Representative Jamie Raskin, a constitutional law professor, a washed-up loser lawyer. She diagnosed a fellow Republican Representative Thomas Massie with Trump derangement syndrome for asking about Epstein. She refused repeatedly to turn around and apologize to the survivors who were seated directly behind her. Every single one of them had raised their hand when asked if the DOJ had met with them. Every single one had raised their hand. Bondi would not turn around. And when pressed on whether anyone else connected to Epstein would face justice, she pivoted to praising the president's economic numbers. That was the answer to will Epstein's co-conspirators face justice? The answer was, have you seen the GDP? Even Joe Rogan was furious. Kyle Rittenhouse called for her resignation. Far-right commentators are demanding her head. The MAGA base, the people who voted for this specifically to drain the swamp and get the Epstein list, are watching the swamp get deeper and the list get blacker and blacker, redaction by redaction. Oh, and there's this. At the same hearing, Bondi quietly confirmed, for the first time, that the Department of Justice has a secret list of domestic terrorist organizations. She wouldn't tell Congress what was on it. She wouldn't say whether the FBI could extrajudicially target Americans on it. She wouldn't say much of anything actually except that Antifa is definitely on it, which is doing a lot of work. The Department of Justice with a secret list that it won't share with the representatives of the people. Land of the free. Meanwhile, in the international theater of operations, that is the Trump foreign policy, we have the following developments occurring simultaneously this week. The president deployed a second aircraft carrier group to the Middle East. He stated publicly the regime change in Iran, the collapse of its clerical government, would be the best thing that could happen. His envoys were in Geneva conducting nuclear negotiations with Iran, and the U.S. military, we learned through reporting, is quietly developing contingency plans for airstrikes on Iran that could last for weeks. To summarize, we are negotiating with Iran while pointing two aircraft carriers at them and planning to bomb them. This is called diplomacy now. And then there is the Board of Peace. The president announced on Truth Social, naturally, that a newly formed Board of Peace would unveil a $5 billion humanitarian and reconstruction package for Gaza on February the 19th. A Board of Peace announced on the internet with an international stabilization force. No further details provided. There was a time when a $5 billion reconstruction plan for a war zone would be the subject of months of congressional deliberation, diplomatic negotiations, international committee hearings. Now, it's a true social post and a meeting on Wednesday. Come if you want, RSVP optional. So, how is all of this landing with the American public? The answer, as always, is it depends. Polls show that Americans disapprove of the Epstein handling by roughly 3-1. That's not a partisan number. That's a nation that was promised us something, didn't get it, and knows it. The MAGA base is fracturing. Conservative commentator Eric Erickson said that Republicans' handling of this will hand Democrats a good election year. Podcasters who helped put Trump back in the White House are openly disgusted. And yet, here is the uncomfortable truth that any honest symposium must grapple with. About half the country sees something different. They see a president who is tough on crime, tough on the border, tough on Iran. They see someone who fights. They see in his combativeness, in his defiance, and even his provocations, a kind of authenticity they find refreshing in a political class they have spent decades distrusting. They are not wrong to distrust that political class. They are not wrong to want a fighter. The tragedy, if that's the word, is in what they got. A fighter who picks up the Epstein fight and then buries it. A transparency crusader whose attorney general redacts everything. An anti-establishment figure who surrounds himself with loyalists and calls his critiques dead to him. The swamp was real. The draining has not occurred. The water level is, if anything, higher. It just looks different now. New alligators. Here is what we should be investigating, not in a partisan sense, not as a matter of left versus right, but as citizens of a country that, whatever its flaws, was built on the idea that power must answer to something. We should be asking, what is on that domestic terrorist list? Who decides who's on it? What happens to the people on it? The Attorney General of the United States acknowledged in sworn testimony that such a list exists. She refused to tell Congress. She refused to tell the American public. In a country where the government has, in living memory, surveilled civil rights leaders and anti-war protesters and journalists, a secret list of domestic terrorists that no one can see or challenge is not a footnote. It's a headline. We should be asking, why were the names of Epstein's victims published while the names of his co-conspirators remain black out? The DOJ said it was a rush job, a clerical error. 50 years from now, historians will be writing about this moment, about whether the most powerful government in human history could not figure out how to redact a PDF or simply chose not to in one direction and chose to in the other. We should be asking what exactly is with Iran, because we're negotiating and also preparing airstrikes is not a strategy. It is a coin flip with nuclear adjacent consequences. We should be asking when a president shares a video depicting his predecessor as a subhuman animal, it receives at most a few days of headlines before the story moves on. What does that tell us about what we've normalized? What does it tell us about what comes next? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the actual questions. They are the questions that investigative journalists, opposition lawmakers, and ordinary citizens with internet connections and functioning outrage should be pursuing every single day. There is a version of the symposium that ends with hope, with a rousing call to action, with the observation that Americans have, throughout their history, found a way to course correct, that democracy is resilient, that the institutions hold. And maybe that version is true. Maybe it gets written. But that version has to be earned. It doesn't arrive automatically. It arrives because people kept asking questions when they were told to stop, because people kept showing up to hearings and raising their hands, because survivors see behind an attorney general who wouldn't turn around, and they sat there anyway, because their presence mattered even when it was ignored. America is not a place. It's an argument. It's a constant, exhausting, sometimes infuriating argument about what we owe each other and who gets to decide. The argument is still happening, that's something, but the argument needs more people in it who are paying attention, really paying attention, not to the outrage cycle, not to who called who a loser lawyer, but to the deeper questions underneath all of it. Who has the list? Who's on it? And who's checking?